Hello and welcome to Military Mantra. In this interview, we have today Commodore Vijay Pal Rawat, who have served the Indian Navy for close to 35 years. And in this interview, we'll try to understand his journey of joining Indian Navy, life with Indian Navy as a Marine Commando, and various life lessons that he has learned over his service. So, welcome, sir, and thank you for coming on this interview today.
Thanks. It's my pleasure to be along with you for this interview.
So, my first question to you would be, how did your journey start, and when did you decide you want to join the Indian Navy? What motivated you back then?
Actually, in my case, it was pretty simple. My father was also in the Navy. And in fact, my grandfathers, great grandfather, most of the people were in the armed forces. So it wasn't very difficult for me to make a decision of a specific profession. Secondly, my father was posted in NDA at least 4 times. And thereafter, being a naval person, we were always staying in the naval base. So, if you see all these things, the environment around and all, so there was definitely a more attraction towards joining the armed forces, particularly the Indian Navy.
Okay, got it, sir. So if you could also tell us, your experience back then in SSB, because you told me that you got commissioned 1986. So before that, you would have gone for SSB. How was your experience and how did you prepare? And what tips you would like to give to the aspirants who prepare now for SSB, for Navy, Army, or Air Force?
See, the Service Selection Board is a grueling 5 days on a procedure where you are tested for your basic leadership qualities, your level of intelligence, your psychological bent and orientation to accept the challenges of a hard military life, as well as your knowledge, emotional intelligence, ability to understand people, ability to be part of a group, and at the end of the day, overall leadership qualities are checked. In my case, I appeared for the SSB in 1982. That was, I think, 1st May 1982. I had reported to 18 SSB, which is in Bangalore. And we had a group of 34 candidates, of which only 4 qualified. And let me also tell you that I scored one of the highest marks that year in the Service Selection Board, which was 555 out of 900. And just to compare, the average passing mark for SSB is 290 plus or minus 10 plus 10%. And it's very rare that people get more than 400, 450. And I scored 555. Basically, the preparation for SSB is not like preparation for any exam, like you class 10th, 11th, 12th. A person who is right from his childhood, if he is grooming himself to be a leader, and is keeping himself aware of what is happening in day-to-day living as well as what is happening in national and international scenarios, is able to gel well with the people around, is able to participate, is able to help people. All these things slowly build up. And if you use a person who plays a team games like football, hockey, basketball, volleyball, this kind of activities, a person who's got a spirit of adventure, they are the building blocks which prepares a person automatically to be able to give a good try in the service selection board. There are a lot of service selection board centers. Those people, they try to train people, aspirants, and well, they do give you they do tell you exactly how an SSB is conducted. And from that point of view, it is okay. But ultimately, it is at the end of the day, what is the kind of preparation you've had throughout your life, which makes a lot of difference for people who are appearing for the SSB. If you do not have it in you, if you got been trainable, if you are a person who doesn't like to take leadership and responsibilities, then I'm afraid it may be well nigh difficult for a person to qualify the difficulties of maneuvering the SSB.
Okay, okay. So you spoke about a lot of qualities which has been looked at SSB. So we also hear
Yeah,
about something called OLQ, called officer-like qualities, that there are some 15
yeah,
OLQs. So does
yeah.
somebody develop those qualities, then go to SSB, or does it get gradually developed over the academy? What is your perspective about that?
Actually, if you make it very objective, then it becomes very difficult for people to understand. When you say 15, then
Hmm.
people start realizing, is it like, you're mucking up 15 things to pass an exam and get full marks? But I'll put it this way. In my case, right from class first till class 12th, I was the class monitor. And I used to take part in all activities. My father used to groom me in the service way of life. So there was already service orientation. Plus, my father used to encourage us to play sports. And I was good in sports. I've represented my school at a state level. zonal football and hockey, and also athletics. And then my father used to encourage us to participate in, lecture, competitions, and public speaking competitions, and kavita recitation competitions, and storytelling competition in a school. We should take part in dramatics. And thereafter, in class 10th, 11th, I was the house captain, and class 12th, I was the school captain. So what I want to tell you is that it is not necessary that for people have to achieve all these milestones before they can easily crack the SSB. What I'm trying to tell you is that this is the kind of requirement which is there. Throughout class 1st to class 12th, you have to be a good student. You have to have a sense of responsibility. You have to take initiative, and you have to work hard. And all these things would be part of your traits, which will keep you in good stead if you appear for the SSB. Coming to the officer-like quality, this is some quantification of the entire personality of a of a armed forces officer. And this is the emphasis which we give on all the training academies in the armed forces, starting from the National Defense Academy, followed by the senior level training, like you have the Naval Academy at Ezimala, you have the Army Indian Military Academy and OTAs in various places. There is in particular IMA. Then you have the Air Force Academy in Hyderabad. So these are the places where they groom you with the good officer-like qualities. And what is officer-like qualities? Essentially, it is leadership qualities. You can actually break it down to effective intelligence, sense of responsibility, self-control, self-confidence, positive attitude, emotional intelligence, decision-making ability, then liveliness and determination, ability to actually be a part of a group, then take initiative, be cooperative, and ultimately it is teamwork. Overall, officer-like quality is nothing but the mark of a good leader. And in the armed forces, they train you so that you can be a good military leader at all levels. Because in the armed forces, right from the time you get commissioned in the armed forces, till the time you achieve the highest of the ranks based on your capability and your, to a certain extent, luck factor, everywhere, the ability to lead a team matters, and matters the most, because ultimately we have been trained to go the harm's way. So that is how I can sum up the officer-like qualities.
Got it, sir. So if you could also tell us, your experience in the academy. You would have gone to National Defense Academy and then to INA as well. How was your life there? Any memorable incident that you would like to share with the aspirants or the audience?
The life in the academy was very enjoyable. I would say that for that age, in the hindsight, I can say life was very enjoyable. It was very adventurous. But it is an academy like NDA is a normal academy where you are actually doing graduation, pursuing graduation. In addition, there are various other subjects they teach you basically so that they can develop your all-round personality to be a good military leader. These include, heavy focus on discipline, then drill, physical training in the morning, parades, and then thereafter, confidence building things like swimming, jumping from 7 to 10 meters boat in swimming pool. Thereafter, doing horse riding, bareback horse riding, and then doing lane jumping in the horse with the horse. And then people do gliding, and then of course sailing the small yachts. And apart from this, there are like you study military history, military geography, you study a foreign language. Apart from a normal regular syllabus for science or arts subjects. This in a nutshell is the life in the academy. It is very jam-packed, and for that particular age, you would know what hit you. It is mentally, psychologically, and physically very demanding. And obviously, it has to be demanding because the armed forces life itself is very demanding. When you compare, I don't want to compare it with the life in other sectors, because I'm sure that there is an element of high risk and high demand and other very important requirements. But just to say that the life in academy is a reflection of what you want to actually face throughout your life in the armed forces.
Got it, sir. So after you got commissioned, you opted for Marine Commando Corps. So you are also a Marine Commando. So what motivated you back then, to join the Marine Commando Force? Probably it was, I guess, 4 years after the Marine Commando was actually formed.
Yeah, actually, I got commissioned in 1986 July, and 1987 was the time the Marine Commandos were formed. And I did my sea time. Every naval officer, as part of his commissioning course, has to also undergo 6 months tenure on board a ship where they do something called as watchkeeping, where they study each and every aspect of a ship, right from the engine room to electrical power generation system, radar, sonars, the weapon system, missiles, close-in weapon systems, the entire torpedo anti-submarine warfare systems, and of course navigating a ship at sea, which is not very easy. And there are rules of roads, and there are maneuvers, and there are certain engine regimes and all. The sea is not very for the sea is not very kind to people who are unable to orient with the life at sea. All these things, and thereafter you get qualified by the commanding officer by being bestowed a watchkeeping certificate, which qualifies you to be part of a ship and stand a watch in a ship. So after doing my watchkeeping, I realized that I was more inclined towards doing something more physically demanding, and something which is slightly hatke, which was the mine clearance diving officers course, which is again a very grueling course, physically and mentally very demanding. So that happens in diving school Cochin. So that course was for about a duration of 7 to 8 months. So I did that course, and obviously after completing that course, I did my basic infantry commander course at Belgaum, which is a good course of 33 days. It's a very interesting course, and nobody wants to repeat that course again. And thereafter, I then volunteered as an obvious choice for the Marine Commando course, which is the mother of all difficult courses in our country, I must say.
Yeah. Sir, if you could briefly tell us, how does the selection process, the training of a Marine Commando looks like back then, and probably it would have evolved by now. If you can briefly tell us about that.
Yeah, actually, initially we had the Marine Commando courses, some part of the course was covered with the armed forces, with the army, and thereafter some part was covered. The amphibious part was covered by the Indian Navy, and you all had to have the background of being a diver, means being an underwater operative. So slowly and gradually, the course duration was also very long. Like when I did my course, I did 14 months of Marine Commando course, which is actually very backbreaking. But over a period of time, there have been people who have gone abroad and done the U.S. Navy SEAL courses and other courses offered by various countries like Malaysia, and and then they will over a period of time they realize that there are certain aspects of the course which can be enhanced further, and there are certain aspects which is repetition and should not be actually part of the course. And overall, today we have a very good course, and I was fortunate that when I was the principal director, special operation and diving at Naval Headquarters, I held that billet for almost 8 years from 2012 to 2020. All these changes, I was lucky to be part of all these revisions in the training, which has made it more work oriented and also very effective, so that there could be optimization of the training effort, as also we are able to produce a very good combatant who can be called himself as a proud Marine Commando.
Got it, sir.
Yeah, so now coming to a basic question, which what is required is that a person should be physically very fit. And when I say very fit, means he actually has to be very fit. He should be able to run 1 mile in about 5 minutes, 40 seconds. He should be able to run 2.5 miles with 5 kg weapon and 5 kg pack in a time schedule of 14 minutes. He should be able to do about 100 push-ups in a time period of 1 minute. He should be able to do crunches in the same time. He should be able to do about 8 to 10 pull-ups. He should be able to bear the physical rigor which is required of being part of the special forces. He should be very good in swimming, because Marine commandos are essentially amphibians basically. So you have to be very good in swimming both on top and underwater. Of course, underwater swimming it's a specialized training which you do in diving school as part of the diving course as well as Marine Commando course.
Okay.
Then apart from this, one has to be very disciplined. One has to have a strong ability to be loyal to the organization. You should be having a great sense of responsibility, and overall you should have a very good self-confidence. And I may just add, a sense of humor also, because while doing this course, there are times where you feel like giving up. There are times where you feel that why have you even opted for this course, because life is better outside. But then it's you have the team along with you. There are people doing along with you. They are also slogging, and then you have the willpower, and there is also self realization that once you become a Marine Commando, this is all you will do in life. So So those kind of picturization of what a marine commando would be, a lean, mean fighting machine. All those aspects are there, and despite that, sometimes you feel like giving up. So you need to have a sense of humor to keep yourself more encouraged and motivated.
Got it, sir. So if you could also throw light on, how was your experience during the probation? And, we even hear about the Hell's Week and also the blood oath that has been taken by Marine Commandos. So you could put a little light about those experience as well.
Yeah, the Hell Week, now the Hell Week has changed slightly more and it has become more effective. In my time, the Hell Week was longer and it wasn't that physically demanding, I would say, as compared to what it is today. So I'll tell you about the Hell Week. What essentially happens in Hell Week is it is a continuous 96 hours of non-stop physical endurance performance. And they give you just about 2 hours in a day to freshen up and wear a new dangri and shave and all those things and be ready for the next level of physical exercise. So it is actually, you would say that 22 hours in a day you're not allowed to sleep, though you're given food 3 times in a day. You're adequately hydrated, and in that 4 days of hell, you are doing a lot of activities. You're doing mud crawl, you're doing long endurance swimming, you're lifting weights, you're lifting the boats and then pedaling the boats, and then you're firing also. You're doing obstacle combat, battle obstacle courses. And then you're doing other, commando PT where you're lifting a guy and running, 200 meters, 300 meters. Thereafter, they're doing some karate, then doing unarmed combat. You're totally full of sand all around, and you don't know actually what is happening. It's just a muscle memory, and it's just that Hell Week doesn't happen in the initial phase. It happens in somewhere in the middle of the course. So by and large, people are adequately trained. And what is seen is that in the Indian Marine Commandos, there are very few people who get out in Hell Week. Whereas in the US Navy SEALs, almost 80-90% people do not qualify the Hell Week. But in the Indian Navy, my experience, it will be just about 5 or 10% who go out of the course. Otherwise, everyone else. And the reason is that they have done the diving phase and they have done bulk of the hard physical endurance courses. Thereafter, they come for the Marine Commando, so they're better physically and mentally prepared.
Got it. So if you could also briefly tell us what are these specific qualities that you look into, when you select a Marine Commando?
Firstly, his psychological bent of mind. Is he a team guy or not? If he's not a team guy, if he's got this independent personality and he doesn't believe in building the team, then he's the last man to be in the special forces. Secondly, he need to have the ability to be very enthusiastic all the time. He should be able to take all the responsibilities, whatever has been given to him, and of course, the risk-taking ability has to be high. And all this while there is a saying that "Josh mein hosh nahi khona chahiye." That kind of personality is someone we would love to have in the special forces, and there is an element of psychological intelligence which a person need to have. Now, all these things, when I say, it is not very easy for people to understand what I'm trying to say. But when you are seeing people doing the course and they actually wither out, those people who are not good, they just wither away, and it's only the good guys who remain at the end of the day. So people who are physically extremely fit, mentally extremely strong, and they have a strong sense of loyalty towards the organization. At the same time, they also have a very high risk-taking ability. And I would again like to add a good sense of humor.
Got it. Sir, you also were telling me about the blood oath which is taken, which is very unique in the Marcos.
Yeah. See, every special force has got their ethos and they have their traditions. And I am quite aware of what the Army Special Forces do and what the Garuds do. In the Marine Commandos, we were evolving new, so I was part of the evolution also. What we have is that at the end of the day, when people have gone over this grueling 8 months of course and they are now the fortunate party, where some people are unlucky also when they can get hurt very badly and they cannot do the course, or somebody gets medically unfit despite being physically and mentally very fit, he's unable to be part of the group, so he now tries the next time. Those guys who are able to qualify the course, they are taken to the Pratigya Sthal, and there they are administered an oath for the country. And once the oath is completed, they are supposed to take out that dagger, which everyone is carrying in his belt, and then just give a slight cut on your thumb, and then give that tilak, khun ki ahuti, that's called. And that, in my view, is the greatest self-confidence a person can show, and the loyalty to the motherland.
Got it. So we keep hearing about, the special forces. It can be the Para SF or it's the Garud or the Marcos. What makes them so special according to you? We keep calling them special forces.
See, I've in my tenure of service of almost 35 years in the Navy, I've been trying to convince people that special forces doesn't mean that you're a Rambo or you're a Tarzan. You're a normal human being. Maybe you're being bestowed and endowed with better physical and mental abilities. When I say mental ability, doesn't mean that your IQ is very high. Mental ability to do the kind of activities which are required of you without saying no to it, and then still be able to go the harm's way, because you're the first people in, and you may not be out, but the first people in is the special forces in any armed force of the world. So the special forces become special for a couple of reasons, and one reason is that the selection of the people, because you cannot produce when there is an emergency, you cannot produce special forces in dozens, and in thousands you cannot produce. It is very difficult for you to identify and identify a person, then to put him through the rigors of training, and then make him a special forces person after 8 to 9 months. Every Army SF has got a different way of doing it. The Garuds have got a different way of doing it. We got by and large the most elaborate way of doing it. I'd say the longest course we have, which is basically the US Navy SEAL selection pattern. That's what we follow. It becomes the force becomes special because the people are special, they're specially trained, they got better weapon and equipment, and then the country per se is able to give them the kind of support which makes them special. If you make people like Tarzans, but you do not give them any kind of support in the sense of best weapon, best equipment, best night sight, best intelligence, and best launch and recovery platforms and all, then they are no longer special. So special forces not only brawn, it is brains, and 90% of that is the excellent support which individual service is able to provide to you to meet your strategic or operational objective.
Sir, if you could also tell us, in terms of roles and responsibilities and as a routine as well, how does one ideal day look like in the life of a Marine Commando officer?
See, any country in the world where you have officers who are in the special forces, after a certain period of time, they get into planning and desk jobs to a large extent. The Jawans or the sailors, they are the people who spend the maximum time in the field. So I would talk about the life of a person when he's in the field. When I say field, means he's not doing a desk job. It's generally till about 8 to 10 years of service. You are actively involved with the boys in the field. So we start our day at around 6:30 in the morning. We do about an hour and a half of very rigorous physical regime, which may include about 10 kilometers run, followed by about 1,000 push-ups and 1,000 sit-ups. Thereafter, it could be a long swim of about 2 to 3 kilometers, followed by a mud crawl. That sort of sums up 1.5 to 2 hours in the morning. Then we have the breakfast and all. Then come back around 9 o'clock. We start the second. It could be some kind of exercise planning or some kind of classroom sessions. And then you can have sometimes battle obstacle course. You can have firing. I'm talking about reflex firing. You can go to long range firing by area weapons and all. You could also do combat diving underwater. Then in the afternoon, you have classroom sessions, or you have your other day-to-day activities and work. And then in the evening, you have games, and thereafter you may have a night exercise, which could be point-to-point navigation at night, or it could be navigation at sea using small boats and your GPS and all. It could be underwater diving. It could be diving in underwater craft, which are specialized in nature. This is the average day for a Marine Commando. You could have helicopter operations, slithering, rappelling, and there are other complicated maneuvers we do with the aircraft. There is skydiving and all those things. But these are all events which happens not on a daily basis, but it happens regularly. You could quantify it at a monthly basis or 3 monthly basis like that. But the day of a Marine Commando is quite challenging because he has to keep on honing it. Idea is that once you train a person, unless you keep his skills honed, because the problem with the armed forces is that not that every armed forces in every part of the world is fighting. So we are preparing for a conflict which may or may not happen. So now you have to keep the spear actually shining all the time. So this activity is something which keeps you. It's called the regular workup. It's called the workup of Marine Commando unit, and that's how you keep the cutting edge.
Got it, sir. So before I proceed to my next question, I see a frogman badge is what you're wearing. If you could tell us, what does that signify?
This frogman badge actually is a Marine Commando insignia.
Yeah.
This was made in 1996, and it shows a frog which has got a MP5 submachine gun in his hand, and it has got the flippers in his legs and a commando dagger in his thighs. So overall, it sums up Marine Commando basically an amphibian. Because we are the only three-dimensional force in the Navy, in the armed forces. We do airborne activities, then we do sea activities, we do undersea activities, we do land activities. So there are elements of the Army SF who also do diving course.
Yes.
And there are also elements of the Garud who also do diving, but they are small. There may be not even 5% in the entire special force of that, because their main focus and the focus is on land and maybe mountains and high altitude, which is again by itself a very challenging domain. Our main focus is on maritime aspects like coastal areas, beaches, and oil rigs and ships at sea, and also ultimately you have to fight on land also.
Got it.
So underwater, and then you go on land, and to go on land, even to go at sea, you need to have some kind of insertion extraction techniques. And skydiving is one technique, which and parajump. All Marcos are paratroopers. All Marcos are divers. So that way. So this actually signifies a Marine Commando. What you see behind is a diving helmet. Just behind me is a diving helmet. This is a standard diving helmet, which has now been discontinued. This was meant for diving deeper than 75 meters.
Got it. I guess you got it from the diving school, Cochin.
That's correct. I was also an instructor in diving school, and this is a memento which I will keep for my life till my lifetime in my position.
Got it.
Because this is something which I've achieved.
Yeah. True, sir. So you spoke about paratrooping. So if you could tell us your first experience when you jumped out of an aircraft, how did that feel like?
Actually, very frankly, it requires a lot of guts to do parajump. And in my case, I would tell everybody will have different views and moments. Well, there are people who will not be able to do the actual thing because their inabilities and all is something which people want to keep it as guarded. But I am a free person, so I would tell you that while they teach you everything, they'll teach you how to land, and there are 7-8 ways by which the wind can take you, and then you can do the rolls and land so that the impact is less. But immediately when you jump out from an aircraft, it is the 8th fall which you have, which hurts you very badly. When you are the training takes care of almost everything, including emergency. So mentally you're prepared, psychologically you're prepared. You develop the self-confidence that we can do the jump. But then that the fear of the unknown always remains. And a night prior to the first jump, it becomes very difficult for you to sleep comfortably. Then you get up, and in the morning you start feeling that although I'm a person who's going to become a Marine Commando, and what is so great about this, and our instructors have trained us so well, I am very confident of myself. But once you sit in the aircraft, again the same feeling comes to you, the fear of the unknown. So what if this happens? What if that happens? All this kind of ideas actually come in your mind, and you're always overcoming. When the aircraft is taking off, you're always overcoming it. And when the instructor tells you, okay, first stick is a number of people who are sitting on one side of the aircraft, and they have to get up and then jump together, one after the other. So when the instructor says starboard stick, rise, very frankly, your knees start buckling, and there is a butterfly in your stomach, and which is quite natural because it is something to do with your psychosomatic effects in your body, which is very natural, and it is not controlled by you. It's not controlled by your it's subconscious. So it comes because there is an emotional aspect of the brain called the amygdala. That is what controls it, and it is good also because it makes you, once you get all this kind of feel, you become more conscious about. Though it is a subconscious feeling, it manifests as a physical feeling what you call physiological feeling, and then you become more cautious and you're better prepared. So all these things happen. But I'm just telling you that the element of if you use a wrong word, you can say that I'm scared. It's not scared, but it is something which is different. It's a unique feeling. And once the aircraft behind ramp opens, so all the noise of the aircraft inside, and there's a sudden swash of wind which gets in, and then you stand and there is a amber light and there's a red light and there's a green light, and then we say green light, go, and the instructor pushes you, you jump by yourself. If you are not the first jumper, you're the third or fourth jumper, you can see people falling like rocks, as if somebody's throwing rocks from the aircraft, and that's sort of something sort of a airy feeling. And then you jump out and you count 1001, 1002, 1003, and then you look up, the parachute is deployed, and once you're out of the aircraft, that the cold wind hits your face, and then there is total silence because the aircraft is gone. All the rumblings which happens in the aircraft, which leads to noise, is all gone. You're very, very peaceful. You can see. I've simply jumped in Agra, and you can see below. You can see houses, buses, and of course farmers there, and you can see some bullock cart moving around there. It's a beautiful. And here in Agra, you can see Taj Mahal also from top, and it is beautiful. Then the second part comes is when you have to land. So the most difficult part is landing, because landing if you don't do it properly, you might get hurt. And so whatever they have taught you, the instructors take care to teach you. It's about 21 days of ground training followed by jumping, because unlike in the civil, private clubs and all, they give you some 3-4 hours of instruction to make you jump, and you jump. But here it is, since you're going to do military jump about at night with weapons and all, so they take particular care, and there's a beautiful syllabus they have to make a person become a paratrooper. So after done the first jump, you generally feel that you've conquered the world. You're the emperor of the world. And then when you go for the second jump, you're slightly more confident, but again, the feeling is same. It's only after doing 10, 15 jumps that you get that feeling. But people have done more jumps. When I say more jumps, is 500, 600 jumps, including skydiving. They say that this feeling comes. It's a natural feeling, but they know how to overcome the feeling.
Got it, sir. So, if you could also tell us, what was your favorite weapon back then as a Marine Commando when you were operating?
In my time, we had a sniper weapon, PSG-1.
Okay.
Now, of course, we got various kind of sniper weapons in the Marine Commandos.
Yes.
That was good. But my favorite weapon was the AK series, AKM, AKMS, AK-103 and all the very good weapons, very, very sturdy weapons. And of course, the Machine Pistol 5 Heckler & Koch, which is perhaps the best submachine gun ever made in the world. So these are my favorite weapons. Pistol, of course, we had only the Belgian pistol, which is now made in Ishapur factory, 9mm. So these are the weapons which I liked the most. In our time, we also had something called the crossbow. Crossbow was like a...
I've seen that photos, yeah.
You've seen the crossbow.
Yeah.
So that was also good. But then we didn't fire too much of crossbow because crossbows have been phased out actually.
Yeah. Okay. Sir, you have spent 35 years in Indian Navy. If I can ask you any 3 life lessons that you have learned from the Indian Navy, which you still cherish, any 3?
There are many lessons in every profession in the country, and but since you asked me specifically, I'll have to think about it. One is that human beings are very important. Number 2 is that it is the man behind the machine which is more important than the machine itself. And third is every person has got unique capabilities and qualifications. It is just that you need to tap the right person for the right job. If you get these 3 things right, then I think you are a good leader and you can lead a very good team. Not only in the armed forces, but in any organization, including corporates or startups, you can do a very fantastic job. So these 3, there are, as I told you, there are various, but these 3, in my view, are essential qualities which a leader in the armed forces, particularly in the armed forces, need to think about and have.
So my final question to you would be, a lot of aspirants will be watching this interview. What will be your message to all those people who want to join the forces?
See, if you want to join the forces, don't go by the glamour aspect. Glamour aspect is like, it just stays for a day or two, though it makes a difference because you also want to look good. One has to take a conscious decision to join the armed forces. The life in the armed forces is not easy by any means because There are, if you talk about the army, there are deployments far away from the families, separations. You are working in high altitudes, deserts, jungle terrain. That is, despite all the precautions and the welfare activities taken by the higher authorities, still there are challenges which one has to which encounters on a daily basis. And now there is also the element of risk because of terrorism and other kind of activities. In the Air Force, also the risk is very high because of the flying, and when they fly on a regular basis, is actually doing fighter combat flying, which is as good as they've gone to war, especially. And also the helicopter pilots are flying at high altitudes. In the Western countries, flying and landing at 9,000 feet is considered to be high altitude, but in our country, there are helicopters going to about 22,000 feet, servicing people in the Siachen. So that is the kind of life people have to lead. In the Navy, of course, the ships are out at sea for more than 200 days in a year. Life is not easy. It is challenging. There are rough seas, and there are exercises after exercises when you go out to sea. So people barely get time to actually sleep for more than 4 to 5 hours in a day. Routine is very tough. So this is the kind of challenge you'll always have. Number one. Number two is that it is a very, very, very extremely disciplined kind of force where punctuality, loyalty, and all things are given due importance. And there are a couple of fundamental rights which are not given to the armed forces. So this is the third thing. Then your entire life is regulated. You cannot say no. There's no word like no in the armed forces. If an order has been given, you have to follow it. You cannot say no, I'm sick, I can go. Nothing like that. So, and then you're going the harm's way. You've been trained to go the harm's way. So all those things are there, which are the professional challenges, and every profession has got challenge. So I'm talking about the armed forces. So this, having said this, I will tell you life in the armed forces, why it is good and why you must give it a try. One is that we are perhaps one of the most looked after organizations in our country, because we are a very well organized entity, and due emphasis is given to human resource development. So there are a lot of privileges people have: housing, food, and schooling facilities and all, which are there in all cantonments and all. You've seen cantonments are, I said, very good places. The If you're in Delhi, you would have gone seen Subrata Park and any other Air Force bases. And if you somewhere go to Bombay, Vizag, Cochin, Goa, you'll find the naval, the naval bases are also so nicely done up, and so that way it is much better. So these are the issues of the armed forces. One has to be disciplined, one has to be reasonably intelligent, one has to have the ability to take risk, and one has to have the ability for seeking adventure, and overall one has to be living under a very strict, disciplined lifestyle. If you are okay for all these things, then I'm sure that armed forces provide excellent career. Because talking about the Navy, you have got the ships are very high tech. The equipment they use are extremely high tech. So if you're a software engineer, if you're IT, if you're a mechanical engineer, all these things comes to play. Then you can fly an aircraft, you can fly a helicopter, you can go diving, you can be in a ship, you can drive a ship, you can be an architect, you can work in the dockyard, shipyards, and all. There are a lot of things which you can do. I'm talking about the Navy. You can be a hydrographer, where you keep on doing mapping of the harbors, and and not only in our country but also other parts of the world. Then you have regular, what you call OC deployments, where you visit various ports, African ports, Australian African ports, European ports, and here, in the Southeast Asia, even to Russia and Japan and all this kind of China. So you can go to such countries. Then we have a lot of this exercises with the foreign navies. There's a lot of interaction. Foreign cooperation also very strong. So overall, there's a good development of personality. And if you are married, then you are staying in places like Bombay, Vizag, Cochin, and they were part of the port city, one of the best cities and highly developed cities, where your ladies, if they're there, they're working, they can actually get a good job. Your kids can be in a good environment. So these are the pluses. Army will also have some such places where they can be very advantageous as compared to other services. So overall, life in the armed forces, though difficult, is very regulated, very disciplined, and there is an extremely high and thrust and focus on human resource development.
Got it, sir. So thanks a lot, sir, for your time on this interview. It was, really enriching experience of listening from you, first-hand experience of, life in the Indian Navy, and also as a Marine Commando and various life lessons. I hope all of the people and the aspirants who will be watching us will gain a lot of perspective. So thanks a lot again, sir, for your time. Have a nice day, sir. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, it has been my pleasure to be with you, Akash, and I'm sure that through this medium, there are people who may understand what I meant, uh, what it is meant when they say that this is the armed forces and this is the SSB and this is the life in the Navy and this is Marine Commandos. We touched on all those aspects, and I must say that you really framed your interview in a good manner, and it's very well balanced interview. I'm sure that people are going to benefit from it. Having said that, I would also like to add that if there is anybody who has any doubts about anything, any aspect of whatever I've said, and perhaps what I've not said about the armed forces, you can directly contact me through Akash, and I would be ever willing to help and provide them a right path. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.